Free Talk Live. It's your show. 1-800-259-9231. We are at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, and it's Mark with you.
And Gar.
And we've been doing back-to-back interviews here. And now with us we have Tom Baugh. Tom, you wrote a book called Starving the Monkeys, Fight Back Smarter. What does this, tell us your background and what this book's about.
Well, first of all, before we start talking about the book, I'd like to say thank you to the Free State Project for inviting me to speak this year at the 2010 Liberty Forum up here in New Hampshire. My background, just briefly, is that I'm a former Marine officer. I went to the Naval Academy. I graduated in '88. I'm a veteran of Desert Storm. I've run my own companies for probably about 15 years now. And I've learned a lot of things about running small businesses and free trade and the ways that the government gets in the way of people just wanting to take care of themselves and their families. And that's really ultimately what we want. We want to be able to take care of ourselves, take care of our families. And what drives us into activism is when things get in the way of that. So this is a really important time in our country, and people are getting more and more harassed and backed into a corner economically in many cases.
Yeah, more of their paychecks are going to the government, and it's, the government's cracking down with the IRS on different people. Absolutely.
And yet the people who oppose this are looked at as the aggressors.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why the subtitle of the book is Fight Back Smarter. Because the basic theme of Starving the Monkeys, Fight Back Smarter is that all these encroachments on liberty, all the abusive law enforcement, all of these things that seem totally out of hand and the government is out of touch is really, in the theme of this book, is that's what the majority of the people in this country want. And it seems weird to people that are like at a Free State Forum or a libertarian event to think that you may actually be in the minority. And so if you're in the minority and you want liberty, and if the majority actually does want tyranny, you can't just do the normal things. You can't do the voting. You can't do the educating. You can't do the protesting, the rallies, the suing, the begging. Those things won't work. Because if you're in the minority, they don't care.
The majority gets their way.
Exactly. And so you've got to fight back smarter. You've got to learn different strategies that aren't what we would like to think of it. We'd like to think that rules and truth and justice matter, and to some extent they still do, but it's becoming obvious with the legislation that we see coming down the pike that there may be a time very soon when rules and truth and justice don't matter anymore. And Radley was talking earlier about some of the abuse of law enforcement. Well, people say things like, I'm going to go get my gun, or I'm going to let them pry it out of my hands.
Yeah.
Well, I like to say cold dead hands won't win this war. I mean, if you get your gun and you try to fight it out, they're just going to kill you.
And the fact is, there are multiple examples of that happening in American history, in the recent history.
Right, and there's a better way to go. And I talk about some of these things in the book. And one of the things to keep in mind is that the people who would defend their liberty, who would get out there and try to make something happen, or even as some of the Free State Project people are seeing, that you just go out and say, I want to exercise my rights, and you get harassed.
It's true.
Right? In many ways, just like with gun grabbing, what they're trying to do is trying to intimidate you or trying to provoke you into reacting so that then they can throw the power of law at you. Right? And so we have to look at it a different way and realize that these abusive things are not about just taking away your liberty. What they're trying to do is set up an evolutionary system to get rid of exactly the people that we're going to need later, because we're headed for a collapse.
I think the United States government is spending itself into a collapse. It's difficult for me to imagine something else.
Right. Right. Yeah, we're seeing small businesses and homeowners ruined. Farmers are dismantling some of their infrastructure. So we're facing a time of irreparable economic damage. The IRS enforcement this summer is probably going to be worse than it has ever been because the revenues are dropping off.
And clearly,
don't forget they're going to be doing the new medical program too. If you don't want to, the IRS is going to be there enforcing that too.
They're the ones enforcing it, the Treasury Department. And I think clearly we have already reached the point of lawlessness, and we reached it a long time ago. It's just that not enough people realize it, or enough people don't care.
Right,
that
exactly.
They're getting the advantages. I mean, de Tocqueville warned about this in the early 1800s, and
right.
we're there. It's
right,
happening.
Absolutely. And the message that the majority is sending to people who love liberty is basically stay in your cage. And in the context of starving the monkeys, don't threaten our banana supply. They're trying to get you to just bow down and take care of them. And it's time, Atlas Shrugged fans will see the theme. It's time to stop feeding them. And unfortunately, unlike in Atlas Shrugged, where things got bad, and then when it got halfway bad, everybody decided, oh, okay, we're going to stop, you're right, we're going to give you your liberty back, and we're going to give you your freedom back. That's not the way it is. When things start getting bad, people are going to demand, the majority who are oppressing us, they're going to demand even more. And that's going to cause an avalanche effect that will just totally collapse everything.
Now, when you say the majority, and I think it may be right, because now, as I understand it, I've heard this statistic somewhere. I don't have it all sitting right here in front of me, but more than 50% of Americans work for the government, either through as a bureaucrat on a state, local, or federal level, or they have contracts. They work for a company that has contracts with the government, and
right.
Therefore, we have a nation of bureaucrats.
Right, and beyond that, everybody who benefits from a regulation. Like if you have a license to do some vocation, you're benefiting from a government monopoly. Are you going to want that status quo to change?
Absolutely right.
Probably not. I mean, it doesn't mean that everybody who's in one of those classes is a bad person. It just means they have a propensity to depend on the status quo, and that bias is a very, very dangerous force that I don't think enough people are awake to yet.
Tom, first of all, people want to find the book. Where should they go?
They can go to Starving, the Monkeys, Keys, I think I spelled it right.
Not Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones.
Right. StarvingTheMonkeys.com.
Okay, and what would can you give us some examples of what people would find, the approach that you would suggest?
Yeah, tell me the solution.
Okay, that's a good point. All struggles in history are economic. And so what I present in this book is ways of recapturing the basic economics of how we are supposed to live with each other. We're supposed to trade value for value, and we've been bred away from that. We've been trained to not even think in those terms. And so I give some tutorials in there of some basic economic principles that nobody's learning in school anymore. Nobody's taught for a long, long time. And unfortunately, it's 400 pages, so it's a lot more than we can go into here. But there's a lot of basic economic training. There's some materials that you need to go out and get to refresh yourself. Atlas Shrugged is one of those. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. There's a whole series of things that people need to learn in order to learn what an economy actually is and what free trade means. What we've been experiencing in this country is not free trade, it's corporatism. It's a regulatory environment that benefits large businesses and weeds out the little guy.
Yeah, it's trade, but it's not free trade.
Exactly.
Right.
And so it's hard for people to get their mind around, especially if they've been isolated. If we are in the minority, imagine the guy who's never heard this message, never heard the Free State people, never heard any of these independence things. They could feel like they're all by themselves. And the Fight Back Smarter part, I want to throw this out real quick. If you're out there and you feel like you're at the end of the road, I want you to hang in there, because the future after the collapse is going to belong to those of us who know how to create value. And your oppressors are going to go away soon. When the tyranny starts, what that means is they're about to go away because they can't feed all these people, right? So,
right. Well, people in the government don't produce anything. They don't grow food. They don't transport that food to the grocery store. They don't stock it on the shelves. They don't do anything but steal money out of the pockets of each one of the people that does that.
Right. And so if you're feeling like you're into the rope, get back to those basic economic principles and wait, because your time will come.
And Tom, on economics, I know we're running up against the clock very soon. On economics, do you see, based on what the central bank, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, the various administrations going back for years, and not just this one, and both parties have done regarding the infusion of liquidity into the system, do you see a future coming of very, very bad inflationary problems that could be so bad that people better start getting prepared now?
Gardner, don't you know that asking that question makes you a conspiracy theorist? And,
oh man,
and maybe even a domestic
this.
terrorist. That's right. Of course, yeah, that's gonna have a major effect.
Right. StarvingTheMonkeys.com.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Tom Baugh.
And thank you for having me.
Thanks.